Hi everyone, this is Tommy from Studio Ultra Mega with another Operation Battle Ready tutorial. Episode 31, Yellow. We are only going to need 3 colors to pull this off today. All scale color, we need orange leather, sol yellow, and Tenere yellow. So today we're going to go over how to get a nice smooth yellow on a model right over black primer and without using an airbrush. It's not that hard. I'm trying to make sure that you can see my palette in this and kind of see that mixing that occurs. And this whole big first step, I wanted you to see it, but sped it up plenty. We're just doing a nice flat base coat of that orange leather. It's a good tone for yellow. It covers, it's very opaque, it covers in, one really nice coat, maybe 2 thin ones, Duncan. But yeah, we're going to cover this whole thing, this whole section that we're going to do here in orange leather. And then after that, you will be able to see the mixes and how we build it up to a nice smooth yellow. Okay, so here on the palette you can see the gradient I've created between the sol yellow and the orange leather. And you see where I'm dipping in, it's, we're looking at 80% orange leather, 20% yellow at this point. And we're doing a super nice thin coat over everything. Building up a bright, opaque color over black is only about patience. Everybody likes to talk about, like, people who like to use zenithal priming. That only helps if you're painting with glazes and stuff. If you're painting, if you're going to be doing blending and stuff, there's no point to doing zenithal priming because while paint is translucent, 6 or 7 layers is not. So especially if you're doing layered blending as a style, don't waste your time with that zenithal priming. It's doing nothing. So the name of the game on this smooth yellow is very thin coats so we don't get buildup, and a nice gradual progression of this gradient. Now, as you'll see here, working with the gradient's never a fixed thing. You're always adjusting that gradient as you work, and as you pull paint from it, it'll start to thin out in places, and you'll want to, replenish that area. So you're always mixing and pulling and pushing colors in and out of that gradient. Now, here you see I've kicked up kind of to the next brightest tone, and I begin to cover everything. And at this point, I'll start to leave the shadow areas alone and let this orange leather stay visible in a lot of the shaded areas, and we'll start to ignore those. You'll notice that the method here is very similar to how we do non-metal metallics, it's just so much of it's pulled back. We're not going to emphasize corners, we're not going to go up to white, and we're not going to worry about hitting the different facets of the model so they look like they're reflecting from different angles. We're just going for straight general highlights and nice smooth shadows. Alright, after a couple coats at that tone, we are ready to kick it up to the next level of yellow. And this to see how far up with gradient we are. I brought over a little more orange leather, just to have enough to work with the mix there, and then drag the rest of the sol yellow into it to create that next tone and enough volume for me to work with. Again, now we're going over all those areas, and I'm leaving little bits of that previous tone showing through where I want shadows to appear. This is the step where it finally starts looking more yellow than orange, by the way, if you've noticed. Again, I pulled in a little bit more brown so I can get another fresh mix of that same tone going. And remember, working with these thin layers, when you're trying to do layered blending, sometimes that a second coat works as a new step of color. Like if you do your second coat, you can do a third one sometimes before mixing into a brighter tone, and it'll create, because of that translucence, it'll be like the next brighter tone up. So sometimes before mixing up the next brighter tone, see if going over it again in that same tone you've been using, but just kind of sticking closer to the corners, if that doesn't almost serve as another layer for you. At this stage, we're finally up to using pure sol yellow for our layer. The first time now, without that orange brown in there, you're actually having to deal with that pure thin yellow paint everybody hates to deal with. Again, the key is to make sure that when you thin your paint out, make sure that mix is good. Don't kind of be half-hearted about your mix, so you end up with pockets of water, and those pockets of water will come out through your brush onto your model and create spots that you just can't ever seem to cover. That's when you ever see those spots, that's how that happens. So make sure that paint mix on your palette is thoroughly mixed, which is actually really tough when it's with pure yellow, and I think that's probably the problem people have with it. And now that we're about done with that pure sol yellow, I'm taking some of that orange leather and just kind of, real nice and thin, cleaning up some of the cracks and some of the shadows. Now we're ready to bring in our highlight color, which is the Tenere yellow, and we're going to bring in over some of the sol to create a little bit of a gradient. It's not going to be a big stretched out gradient like we normally do. These colors are pretty close together. We're basically working with a 50-50 mix here for this first layer of highlights, and we're just sticking to our general high points and the big bold corners. Now we finally reached the final highlight color, which is the pure Tenere yellow, and we're just sticking to the edges and very highest points of the piece here. And as we bring us to the end, we are seeing that we have a smooth, bright, bold yellow with no rough spots and no airbrush. So if this is possible, any color without an airbrush is possible. As we wrap this up, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our patrons over at Patreon that make these videos possible. And if you enjoyed this video at all or found it useful, please like and subscribe.